So, good afternoon, everyone. As it is 4 o'clock, we will get started. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on a very exciting event. Today is our school staff launch event. So, this is the day when we are launching carbon literacy for schools, and I am super excited. So, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. If you are just joining, please do. Introduce yourselves in the chat, say who you are, where you're from, and we look forward to this afternoon and talking you through our carbon literacy for school staff toolkit. So, I'd just like to go through a few things with you. My name's Sarah Davis, and I'm the Sector Advocacy Lead and Lead for Education as well. Joining me today and guiding you through this afternoon's session is Dave Coleman, who is the Managing Director and co-founder of the Carbon Literacy Project, Rebecca Stacey, who is our Schools Coordinator, Linda Foley, who is our Education and Localities Advocacy Consultant, and Fiona Lung, who's our head of IT and systems and who's making sure that everything is running smoothly in the background this afternoon and making sure that that all goes to plan. So just to run through a little bit of housekeeping with you. This session is being recorded. Your videos and mics are turned off, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. At the bottom of the screen, you'll notice we have the regular chat, but we also have Q&A. It would be great if through the session, if you have burning questions that you want to ask, if you could pop those questions into the Q&A so we can either respond by writing the answers to you, or if we think, oh, that's a really interesting question and that would be great to discuss at the end when we have our Q&A, then we can answer it live at the end of the session. So please don't be shy. We do want to hear from you. And of course, like just mentioned, there will be an opportunity for more questions either later on today or at a drop-in session or by contacting the education team, and we'll be happy to assist you. So what are we going to be talking about today? Our agenda. First and foremost, in case anybody is new to carbon literacy, we will be going through some of the basics of what is carbon literacy. Then we'll be talking about why are we doing carbon literacy for schools before delving into the nitty-gritty of what is inside the school staff toolkit. We'll then be going on to the next steps, like how can you get your hands on the staff toolkit and how can you use it? How can you get involved with the Carbon Literacy Action Day? How you can become a carbon literate educator? And of course, time for questions and answers at the end. Before we get started on any of that, though, I would like to pass on to Dave, our co-founder and managing director of the Carbon Literacy Project, for some opening words.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And can I add my welcome to Sarah's? Welcome to our school staff course within our schools toolkit and its launch. It's been a long time coming. We've been working with schools for over a decade now, largely working with different training providers, lots of different schools courses, and those courses have largely been pupil facing. But this toolkit isn't pupil facing. It's about staff in schools. And that wasn't the most obvious route and not necessarily the thing that most people expected us to do. But that is quite a deliberate strategy. We've always had a vision for a school, and I know this won't be news to so many of you who I'm sure share the same vision, but we've always had a vision for a school as not just being about the pupils, not just being about the learners, but being more like a real ecosystem involving staff, involving professional educators, involving the staff that run the school, the estate staff, and obviously all the people that work around that, the local council, the church, the community that the school is set within, and that wider ecosystem. So all of our thinking on schools has always had that vision in place. We helped contribute to the design of the Department for Education Sustainability Strategy, and we're part of the core working group. And very much that was an ethos that we brought to that working group. And we always wanted the DFE strategy to be written in a way that allowed schools to showcase not just work that they did directly with pupils, but that wider work they did involving everybody within the school and all of the people inside and outside the fence line that are directly positively affected by a school. And that was very much something that we wanted to see written in. and that the DfE strategy caters for and allows for that work to be showcased. We also had it at the heart of the work on our carbon literacy educator standard, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in detail later. But it means that when we're working with educators, it's not just about how many pupils are trained or how many people learn about sustainability that are learners. It's about bringing the whole educational setting and all of the settings that surround it into play. And it deliberately, our standard, focuses on spheres of influence within schools. And that's very much more than just the teachers and the pupils. It's that, which is of prime importance, clearly, but everybody else and all that surrounds it. And therefore, we're really pleased and proud to be launching this toolkit and its first course being focused on staff rather than just pupils, because what we're trying to do is give you the capability and the facilities to skill up and have all of the knowledge you need to deliver sustainability in whatever role within a school you play. The Carbon Literacy Project is uniquely well placed to do this at scale because of our approach, which is to work with everyone who lives, works, and studies. It's society in the widest sense. And when people sometimes say to us, well, what is the Carbon Literacy Project? We're a low carbon culture change project. That's what we do. We develop low carbon culture. We change culture into more of a low carbon culture, but it's culture in the widest sense throughout society. So we work with people where they live, the physical places. We work with organizations that are involved in housing. We work with communities. We work with work. So places of employment. So that might be within education, but it might be public sector, it might be private sector, it might be corporate. And we work with people who study. So that means students at all levels through school, college, and university. And we try and join these things up so that the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts. So schools has always been a really important audience for us and very much part of that wider society approach. And currently, we're bringing all of that together in a new accreditation that we launched at the end of last year called Carbon Literate Localities. And this is where we bring together people who live in an identified locality, a place, a village, a town, a city, a county. And the origin of this was we were being approached by localities who were saying, how do we roll out carbon literacy in society at scale where we are? So the localities accreditation is about lots of organizations in any one locality all coming together, training their own people in carbon literacy and contributing that number to a whole number for that whole locality. The locality has a target. There are various requirements of that locality, but the first carbon literate locality is Manchester, Carbon Literate City Initiative, and over 80,000 people are scheduled to be trained in carbon literacy. Almost 15,000 are already trained within the City of Manchester from all walks of life, live, work, and study. And schools are a key part of that. Within any community, within any locality, educators, and particularly schools at scale, all make their contribution internally within those schools and within the society and the locality within which they operate. So lots to go at. We've got lots of ways of assisting you and helping you, but in the meantime, we've got a course for you to become more familiar with and hopefully get some useful information, useful resources, useful inspiration. And we hope you take it a long way within the school settings within which you work. So that's it from me for now. I'll hand back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Dave. Fantastic. Yeah, great to have a nice scene setting there. So we're going to talk now a little bit about some of the basics of what is carbon literacy. So carbon literacy is a day's worth of climate learning and action. It equips individuals, communities, and organizations with the knowledge, motivation, and skills needed to take meaningful action against climate change. One thing that we know is the more that people understand about climate change, the more that they worry. So, inbuilt into the learning outcomes of carbon literacy is taking action. It's solution focused, action orientated training so that ultimately learners feel empowered and motivated to know the action that they can take and then be able to actually take it. As David mentioned, the Carbon Literacy Project is a low carbon culture change initiative, and it's the largest of its kind within the UK. It was also recognised as such by the UN at COP21 in Paris, where it was awarded as a TAP 100, one of 100 worldwide transformative action programmes. So, what does that mean in terms of impact? Well, there are over 131,000 people now who are certified as carbon literate. That is across 45 nations, across all 7 continents, spanning across over 8,000 different types of organisations, ranging from wedding planners to funeral directors, and of course, educational settings. Within education, there are over 26,500 citizens that have been certified as being carbon literate, and that consists of staff, students, and leadership. Now, the majority of our work to date within education has focused largely on FHE, so colleges, sixth forms, and universities. But we have found that there is a growing call for, a growing need for more work within schools, hence the launch of the Schools Toolkit. So why do we want to work with schools? Well, as David's mentioned, the DFE strategy, which is something that we were on the working group for, but that also states the DFE strategy states that by September this year, every school setting needs to have a sustainability leadership and be developing and implementing climate action plans. By producing a carbon literacy for staff toolkit, this will enable all staff within a school setting to be equipped with the knowledge and the skills that they need to be able to contribute towards the implementation of those climate action plans. Additionally, schools actually account for around a third of public sector emissions. So it's a really important area to look to decarbonise when we're looking at decarbonisation of society. But more than that, schools have a unique influence, whether that is with the staff that they work with, the stakeholders that they're involved with, the communities that they're the backbones of, or of course the students and the pupils that they teach, who are the change makers and decision makers and leaders of tomorrow. However, we do know that an environmentally informed global population is essential to addressing and coping with climate change. But throughout the world, in whatever the sphere of human activity or exchange, there is now ignorance, apprehension, and confusion about climate change. For some individuals, groups, and organisations, the problem is unknown, irrelevant, or remote. And for others, it's overwhelming, proportion, or misunderstood. And this is taken from the IPC report from 2018, which really highlights the need for a type of climate education, one that is rooted in climate action that enables people to understand the problem and to take action on it. And students also expect and need training and education around this. There was a report published by the DFE at the end of last year, and it found that only 31% of school leaders could identify the difference between weather and climate, which is something the Carbon Literacy Project of Carbon Literacy Training highlights. Only 49% appreciate that climate change will impact them personally. And 21% suggested that all places would warm equally. So we know that there is a great need for this kind of education for students. However, taking a whole school approach, for students to be educated on climate change, we need staff of all types of, whether that is teachers, whether that's leadership, or all support staff, to have the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence to be able to talk about this with students and reflect this within their systems, their practices, and within the premises of the school. So it ultimately works towards a whole school approach to decarbonisation. So what exactly is in our toolkit? Well, I'm going to hand over to our schools coordinator now, Rebecca, who's going to delve into the nitty-gritty of this.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, so the school's toolkit then, I'm just waiting for the slide to move on slightly. Thank you. So the toolkit itself, every toolkit is a customizable schedule. It has you get the toolkit, you get the slides that you can adapt. They're adapted for either online or face-to-face learning, and they have interactive activities. So every carbon literacy toolkit is built in the same way like this. And then they're sector specific. So we already work, as Sarah mentioned, we work in lots of different sectors already, and they're adaptable. So they have what we call blue slides in them. So facilitators can adapt them to their context, in this case, to your school context or your education setting context. They're a complete kit. They come with trainer's manual and resources document, as well as guides on how to make sure your learners fill in the certificates and make sure that they get their certification. And anybody can deliver training as long as they're carbon literate and have been through our Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy webinar. So the schools toolkit itself, it was a process. So I started work here at the Carbon Literacy Project, and this has been the main focus of what I've been working on. As Sarah mentioned, the further education and higher education sectors are well established by now, and they did a lot of research into what was needed and what would like next. And carbon literacy in schools seemed like the proper next step, if you like. And really, from conversations that I've had with people, it seems that an area that everybody's been crying out for. School coordinator recruited, yep, that was me. Focus group input. So we held a few focus groups really early on in the process, and I know some of you on this call were part of that focus group, so thank you very much for those. And really, in the initial calls, the focus groups led us to the conclusion that it would be used across all schools with all staff. So there are some specific carbon literacy programs that look at school leaders or look at classroom teachers, but we were given some feedback that the schools would use this across the board, and that meant that the toolkit had to be adaptable, and also the activities had to be accessible and would encourage that kind of cross-staff conversation and cross-staff working. So the staff toolkit was produced, the draft was produced, and we focus grouped with that as well. Then we carried out some pilots, and I recognise some names from the pilots that we carried out as well. So thank you so much to people who worked with us on those pilots, and I'll come back to some of the feedback that we got from the pilots in a second. And then here we are at the launch. Boom. Hello, thank you. Consolidation of the sector is next. So that basically what I will be doing, what we will all be doing over the next few weeks, is working with everyone to make sure it's as smooth a process as possible and to get the carbon literacy toolkit out there with as many schools as we can. And then my next phase will be the 14 to 18 pupil toolkit. And I know I've spoken to many of you already about that, and we're starting to think of the best way to approach that age group. Yeah, so that's the process. Following on from that, the specifics of the staff toolkit itself. So it's modular. From the focus group, the feedback was that lots of schools would use this in many different ways. The carbon literacy course itself is 8 hours of learning, some at home, some within the course, some filling in forms. And some schools suggested that they would do that as an inset. They would set homework and they would then follow the course in one day. Some schools suggested they want to do it modular in staff meetings or 2 half days, something like that. So it is modular. And you can see there each module kind of tackles a different aspect of the climate crisis and the work that we do. Threaded throughout this is the climate anxiety and the way that we can speak to young people and other colleagues in schools. So that was a big thing as part of the focus group. So I did a lot of work. I spoke to quite a few mental health charities, worked with their advice, and got some of this research into the staff toolkit. So you can access those resources there and you can get a feeling for the best way to tackle some of those difficult conversations. In module 2, with policy and how governments react, there's quite a few kind of adaptable slides there for your specific area in case there's anything happening in your local area that you want to talk about. But where schools fit in, as Sarah just explained then, it's that unique idea that they can influence the community and they can work with policymakers and give young people that voice. And then obviously module 4, the next steps, is all about planning. And I know, well, we all know, I guess, at the minute that the DfE is talking a lot about climate action planning and sustainable leadership in schools. So module 4 gives schools a bit of breathing space to have a look at what that could look like in their school and how the course that they've just done and all the resources and the ideas that the carbon literacy courses kind of kicked up in those conversations would work with your climate action planning. That's the next slide then, please. Yeah, so the whole thing with the school toolkit really is practical case studies. So as this thread running through, there's so much happening in schools at the minute, well, all the time. And whether it's from eco schools or from Let's Go Zero or from some of the other kind of support, the climate ambassadors, all of these partners that are working with schools at the minute, there is a lot of resources and a lot of case studies of what's happening out there. So every kind of module, every lesson, every activity is peppered with these practical case studies that allow schools hopefully to get a bit of inspiration. Some of them are quite easy, kind of what we call that classic quick win, where you can think, right, oh yeah, I can go back to school and I can try that, or I can pick that up with my head teacher tomorrow, or I can take that to my governing body tomorrow. But there's some really interesting ideas in those case studies. Support for climate anxiety, I've already mentioned. Every module revisits that. That was thinking that if you are doing it as modular or you are doing it as a staff meeting, then you can recap it and kind of go, right, do you remember when we talked about this aspect of climate anxiety, or how worried? And that's for adults as well as the young people. That works across the board. And climate action oriented, as I mentioned, the idea that you can walk away thinking, right, this is my climate action plan. This will be useful for the sustainability lead. It will give staff that confidence to kind of tackle the issues and maybe make sure it works within your school context, which is really important. We know how tight time is for teachers and for head teachers and governors, and we really want to make sure that everything they do is worthwhile and can be kind of translated into concrete action. Yeah, so will it work for you? And again, a lot of this came from the focus groups and the pilot. So as I mentioned before, we designed it for all staff. So it's interactive. There's plenty of time for people to talk, for people to network, for people to, and that's so in case, people doing it across multi-academy trusts or against around clusters of schools. So it's very much a cooperative. This is what we're doing. Let's try this. Let's have these conversations. There's a little bit of kind of role play with different conversations that you might have with people, bringing your team along, building your team, all that kind of thing. It's just designed for all staff, really. As I mentioned before, it's modular, it's flexible, and we're really hoping to see that work. I think the feedback from some of the pilots suggested that doing that modular, even in 2 half days, would work really well because it would keep the conversation going across the school calendar year. So rather than it just being in one area and then kind of forgotten about, which we obviously don't want to happen, then bringing it back to staff every term would really help that. It's practical, so there's time to discuss the evidence, there's time to look at their pledges. So as part of the carbon literacy course itself, the group pledge and the individual pledges that you make can be discussed within the course time. Evidence forms can be filled in within the course time to make sure that your staff feel supported when they're doing that. And it's very practically based. So you will walk away feeling like you've learned something and you've got something concrete to go back to school with and get on with. And the school-based relevant case studies is really key. As you can imagine, with all the different sectors that we work in, we get a lot of case studies, a lot of pledges, a lot of action. So making sure it's school-based and relevant is really important. There's a lot of slides, what we call the blue slides that we've mentioned already, to give schools the chance to throw in there those case studies that are relevant to your area or your school. There will be great stuff already happening, whether at your school or around your area. So we want to make sure that's included within the course. Yeah, so unfortunately, we were going to have somebody just to quickly, just so you didn't have to listen to me for 20 minutes, giving a bit of feedback from the pilots now, but unfortunately, they couldn't make it. So I'll just quickly go through some of the ideas and what we changed following the pilot. So we held 2 pilots in different areas of the country, and I also shared the resources, the slide deck with a few people and discussed their feedback and got feedback that way. One of the first kind of key areas that came out from across the board really was that the activities and the time to network was vital. I think if many of you on this call may already be carbon literate, so you will have gone through the carbon literacy course itself, and if you did a full day one, you know how that time that to kind of take in what's been said, especially the science bits and the more complex ideas, is vital, but also to explain it and to share it and to talk to us about it. I think for teachers, the idea to talk to people within your school is quite rare, to get that time to just sit and to network and to think, right, this is what could work across us. This is what could work for my year group, my subject. Let's see what works for them. And so that activity and that time to network is really, really vital. The other feedback from the pilot, so following the pilot, we built into the course a lot more case studies and gave people more of those blue slides in a chance to add in their own context. Case studies are collected from everywhere, from all types of schools. And really, once I kind of got into the nitty gritty of collecting these case studies, there are so many that could have been included. So, giving the facilitators who's leading the course the chance to kind of think, right, let's just have a quick think now of something that could be included to just to give that local, really local flavour. And it does make a big difference. It really does inspire people. Yeah, we've got a positive from the pilot was that it was a good mix of visual and audio, which is important, I think, for a day's training, lots of training. And also it means that it was very accessible. It's not just a case of people sitting and listening and reading, which I thought was quite vital. That was a good bit of feedback. And then finally, the idea that ensuring that activities are easy to understand and to explain, which I think was something that, because you get with the feedback, you get with the kind of toolkit, a trainer's manual. Now, the trainer's manual, as you can imagine, could be pages and pages and pages. But as a former head teacher myself, I just thought, yeah, I wouldn't, people just don't read everything. So what we did was kind of, obviously all the information is still in there. It is still pages and pages and pages. But right at the beginning, there's a kind of quick guide. If you don't read anything else, read this. This is what you need to do. And it just gives that idea that actually, the blue slides are here for that. The contextual information is there, the resource document is there, everything is there that you need. So just make sure when you deliver the training, when you use the toolkit, that you give yourself that bit of time to look through that. I've just seen a quick question that makes sense to answer now, so I'll do that now. So size of group per session. So it's most of the time when especially because I deliver carbon literacy training as well, we deliver carbon literacy training, we kind of work with kind of groups of like 12 to 15. So obviously if you've got more than one facilitator, you could do larger groups. It's very adaptable up and down. It's very straightforward. The pilot groups ranged from quite small, kind of 4 to 5, up to kind of 29, 30. It has been designed for online, but we haven't trialed it online as yet. But it can quite easily be adapted online. So that's kind of another bit of work that I'll do before, if anybody wants to try it online, that would be great. But yeah, we do. It has been designed to be online as well. So I hope that answers that question. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, steps to delivery. So we've kind of alluded to this already. The first thing, and really one of the most important reasons as to why we started with school staff instead of the kind of pupil facing way, is that what we're looking for is you to become carbon literate. So once you're carbon literate, you can attend a Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy session, which are regular webinars. We do education specific ones, school specific ones. We're hoping to host them almost monthly. They're free. And the idea is that that goes through all the things we've talked about in terms of how you become facilitator, how you access training, and kind of hints and tips of ways to do the training itself. Once you've attended one of those, it's to complete our toolkit request form. I probably should mention at this stage that if you talk to me, you can email me at schools@carbonliteracy.com. We'll pop all this information in the chat. You can complete our toolkit request form, decide on the most applicable course, which in this case is the school staff toolkit, adapt and deliver training, as I mentioned, kind of talk about the idea of those blue slides and local case studies and local community groups that might be able to support you and help you, and then deliver your training to staff and students. So that's kind of the different steps to deliver it there. Yeah, I've just seen another question that would make sense to answer now. We'll discuss pricing in a second. There isn't a maximum time to complete the modules, and in fact, one of the ideas that with the kind of modular approach is the idea that if you're doing it over the course of a school year, you're revisiting it as you come back. The only challenge to that is ensuring people do fill in the evidence forms and the pledges in order to get their certification. But yeah, there is no specific time there. And no, you don't have to be part of the staff to deliver this. Parents, so really thinking of this kind of steps to delivery there, as long as you've gone through a carbon literacy course, you've attended the Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy session, then you can request a toolkit. That's the idea, the cascade idea. Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, so pricing. Pricing is, at the minute, there's a few variables. This is one of the challenges that we found because education settings are incredibly variable. For schools, we're offering it free of charge with certificate purchase, and you can see there at the bottom that certification, how many certificates you need to purchase at the moment. So yeah, so it's up to 500 like that. So that's it. And then you can request a toolkit and we can get you started with that. Other organisations, the pricing is yet to be confirmed. And the best thing to do at the minute is just to contact me directly. And then I can get that information from you because it will depend on whether you're a for-profit, what kind of organisation type you are, what annual turnover you have, and the context in which you'll be delivering the course. And that goes for local authorities as well at the minute. So I'm sorry, I can't give you too much detail for that right now. But yeah, but other than that, just contact me. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Okay, I think I'm just going to quickly check the Q&A and just see if there's anything else that makes sense for me to answer now. I don't know if Sarah's got anything to add to any of that. I'm just checking the questions. It all looks fine. Yeah, otherwise I will hand over to Linda.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for that. Really, really interesting. So that was really interesting. I'm sure a lot of you are interested. We did the pilots, and the issue with schools, as you know, is always, right, how do we put this in front of senior leadership, in front of governors, in front of the board of the Multi-Academy Trust? We want it to happen. How do we make it to happen? So what we've decided to do in those areas where we are kind of piloting it, local authorities, is to focus on a timeline that involves another initiative, which is called CLAD. So if you could, thank you. So some of you will be aware that this is the biggest international climate action day in the world. If you search it, that's what it says. So it's a day of climate education and climate action, and it coincides with COP. To give you an example, last year, 3,926 people were trained during the Carbon Literacy Action Day window, which is this year, it's from Monday the 10th to the 13th of November. So those schools who've already signed up for this and were involved in the pilot, what they have done is the rollout that they intend to have is to train up a few members of staff. They then attend the workshop, which is available regularly, about delivering successful carbon literacy. They then contact Rebecca through the school's inbox, and they get the, if you like, the toolkit. So they get the manual, they get the resources, and then they work together to create, using the adaptable blue slides, to make it relevant to their particular context. So what they'll do is they'll look at things that their school has done or local schools have done that are particularly relevant to them, and they can add those slides to the toolkit. They then identify a day, probably around inset days in July or early in September, or they decide that we'll do a half a day, but some schools have like a 2-hour Wednesday afternoon sort of inset. So they're going to look at how they're going to break up the toolkit, decide who they're going to deliver it to, and then they will put those dates in the diary. And that will enable them to start the process of carbon literacy in their school. Now, what's happening in the schools that we're working with currently is they are then planning to use the staff that have been trained up to start training up when we get the toolkit for school students, the 14 to 18-year-old toolkit. What they've already done is they've put in their calendars for the year to focus on the Carbon Literacy Action Day. So they've got a timeline, they've got dates to put into the calendar so that they can deliver something before Christmas that will act as a bit of a catalyst. So what is the Carbon Literacy Action Day? It is an opportunity to be involved in an international project. So last year, keynote speaker was Ed Miliband, who said, I love the Carbon Literacy Project. 3,952. Just to give you one other example, the government of Jersey decided that they wanted to provide training for their students. So they created a course and then they hired a hotel and they delivered to 200 students on that day in order to start off the kind of carbon literacy for young people in Jersey. So that's Carbon Literacy Action Day. If you could just move on, please. Thank you. If you're interested, by the way, in that, if you go onto our website, there is a link and there is a webinar about how you can get involved in the Carbon Literacy Action Day. Now, in the chat, we had the question, what is a carbon literate educator? So for those people who have got involved by working for businesses or local authorities, we've got something called a Carbon Literate Organisation Award. In fact, our awards evening is next Thursday and involves lots of organisations. that doesn't really work for educational institutions because there is this constant turnover of students. And so we've come up with an award that has been will be accredited by the Carbon Literacy Project, which is a badge that educational institutions, schools, universities, colleges can use to show that they are committed to climate education and climate action. And we know this is very prestigious, and we know that there is competition among organisations to get this award. So, for example, one school that we're working with at the moment is a school that has Ofsteded as good, outstanding in certain aspects. You walk into the school, and what you see is a wall full of awards outlining how excellent they are in other areas of school life. They are really, really keen to become the carbon literate educator. And so they want to go for this award, and you can sign up, you can find out the process, the journey that you need to go on as an organisation. And to put it very simply, you've got to have a senior leader and some staff involved and a student involved, and that will get you to bronze level quite quickly. And then as you increase up the levels, your influence goes wider. You have a higher percentage of your staff and your students that are carbon literacy certified. And then at the very highest levels, you have to have a commitment to sharing carbon literacy with those other stakeholders. So you use your sphere of influence as an educator to have this award. And from working with universities over the last few years, we know that they're really, really excited to get this award. So again, it's something for schools that are trying to show that they're working towards this low carbon culture, that to show that they are exemplary in that particular area. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass back to Rebecca.
Brill, thank you so much there, Linda. Yeah, it's we've got a few questions and a few thoughts in the chat that I'll just have a quick look at now. I think one of the questions that have been asked a couple of times is how to get yourself carbon literate prior to delivering the school's course. So I know that there are opportunities, in fact, one's just been popped in the chat there as well. There are a few opportunities that you can get yourself carbon literate trained, and there is an events page on the Carbon Literacy website if you wanted to take a look at that. And that lists carbon literacy courses both online, some funded, or some very low cost. And up and down the country, so you can take a look at that. There's also the newsletter, which I send out. I try not to send out too often because I know how busy schools are, but that is termly at the minute. And I highlight a few opportunities there for people to attend carbon literacy courses elsewhere, so you can get yourself carbon literate. So you can just scan that QR code in there, or I'll pop that in the chat as well. There's also an interesting question in the chat that I think, Sarah, you may be able to answer, just about training providers applying for CLE status. I don't know if that's something you want to just have a quick mention about now, CLE status, and whether or not it's suitable for training providers.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rebecca. Before I touch on that, though, I just wanted to go back to the carbon literacy training as well. So, if anyone on the webinar today is based in the Northwest, on the 17th of June, there'll be a day of climate action and carbon literacy, which will be hosted by Manchester Metropolitan University, and we'll be there too. We'll be running taster sessions of carbon literacy. And if you are carbon literate already, but you need to have that webinar, that onboarding session, the delivering successful carbon literacy, we'll be running that too. That is free to attend, and we can put the details of that into the chat as well. So coming back to this question, can training providers apply for CLE status? We currently have Platinum CLO status due for renewal in February. The CLE status is very much for educators. So when we say educators, we mean an educational setting. So be that a school, a college, or a university, or a sixth form, in fact. So the qualifying factor for CLE is that you must have students. So one of the major reasons that we developed CLE was because we wanted to ensure that an educational setting was delivering training systemically across the whole institution, which included students. So to answer Hazel's question, it very much depends, Hazel, on whether you are an organization or whether you have students and you teach students. And if that's the case, it's probably a good idea to have a conversation with our coordinator, Holly, who coordinates both CLO and CLE to ensure that you are indeed you are accredited in the correct way. But you are platinum CLA status, which is fantastic. So congratulations for that. But yeah, if CLE is more suitable, if you have students, then that might be something that you want to explore in the future. So I hope that's helpful and answered that question. Yeah, okay, brilliant, fantastic. I did see another question further on, and that was about pricing. So I'm just gonna click a few slides back to try and answer that if I can. Oops, too many. A little bit eager there. Sorry, very eager, in fact. So yeah, the minimum number of £15 certificates to be purchased with the free toolkit. So this was a question asked in the chat about the minimum of £15 certifications. So it's just that over the last 12 years, our certification prices have basically remained the same and they haven't increased due to inflation. So from July this year, there has been a price increase across the board to reflect those different price increases across society. This has been widely communicated, so I'm extremely sorry if you haven't received this. But yeah, from July, certification is increasing to £15. Now, with the school's toolkit, though, it does mean that the actual toolkit is free to access, but depending on the size of the institution, you just need to ensure that you purchase a number of certificates for school staff. So if the school has 500, you need to purchase 10 certificates, and that's really to ensure that the training gets going within the school. And then that increases depending on the number of students that are inside an institution. The school students, however, is remaining at £10 per certificate, and that is for at least the next 6 months as a special introductory offer. So I hope that helps to answer that question on pricing. And I will hand back to you, Rebecca.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, I'm just going to give people just a few seconds just to see if there's any other questions or anything that we can help you with before we finish up. I don't think there's anything else there. Like I've said, please do contact us at schools@carbonliteracy.com and we can get you started with the toolkit. And also, I've just popped in the chat there the link for the event at the Northwest of Manchester Met University. There's also an education specific DCSL coming up, and I'll pop the link in chat for there. So Fran just asked, is the school to, so the way the toolkit works is there's specific blue slides that access for the different nations. So there's obviously different work that's gone on in Wales and different work that's gone in Scotland. So they're all in there with the links to the relevant policy and the relevant updates there and then. So hopefully you can access that and that will guide you, and you can decide which flavour of slides you want to use for those policy sections. And case studies, as I mentioned, are taken from across everywhere, including some from Europe as well, just to, give a international flavour to everything. So yeah, I hope that should be easy to access for you there, Fran. And so to that end, there is some reference and some guidance on the climate action plans for the DFE, but not too much of that. There's a little bit at the side there. And also what you'll find is the way that these case studies work and the way that the conversations go is there'll be lots and lots of input that would work for your climate action plans if you're at the stage where you're working on those as well. And yeah, that's a good question as well, David. With the blue slides already there, is there still a need to get a course individually accredited for the UAE? I guess that's one to have a chat with myself about, just to see how much you would actually want to change the course. I don't know if Sarah, if you want to mention anything like that. Obviously, if the audience is very different to school staff, or you want to make it very specific to your context, but other than that, I think the blue slides should provide enough adaptation. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's going to be worth a conversation. Currently, if you use any of our other education toolkits, for example, the university or the college toolkit, and you were using that in the UAE, which David, I know you have done, um, there needed to be an amount of localization that stretches beyond the localization that we would expect to see within the UK. So just to clarify for anyone on the call, the blue slides are in the toolkit to allow that localization. So within the UAE, there's obviously a different climate, different policy, different society. So I think that would be a conversation that we would need to have because the blue slides alone mightn't be enough because the way that they are designed at the moment is to incorporate the different case studies, etc. However, you'd probably be looking at different policy, you'd be looking at different types of activities, right, where we've talked about maybe flooding within schools, you might be more looking at the heat waves, etc., where we're talking about reducing energy for heating, you might be talking about reducing energy for air conditioning. There's lots of variables. So, and of course, the agency that people have both within the school setting as school staff members and of course when students as well. So yeah, I think ultimately I think that's a conversation that we would have, David, if that's okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And then, yeah, just a question there about, again, with the toolkit pricing, the best thing to do is just to contact me with your context and we'll try and work that out at the minute. I'm sorry, I can't be any more specific at the minute. There's just so many variables we're finding. So we've kind of concentrated on getting the pricing right for schools. Yeah. Okay. I think we're done with questions at the minute.
I mean, we can hang on for a little while and see if anyone's got any more questions in the chats, if people want to come in with any more.
Yeah. Other than that, I guess do you think we're done there, Sarah? Should we, if people want to go, is that everything, do you think?
Yeah, we've got all the links. If you want to get more information, obviously contact us. If you want to arrange a chat, if you want to find out how to get on carbon literacy training yourself, yeah, all the different steps basically. We're here to help you along your carbon literacy journey, whether that's you're new and you're just starting out, or whether that's no, you're already carbon literate, you've been delivering carbon literacy, you just want to get your hands on a toolkit and start delivering it to staff, then please get in touch with us so that we can sort that out for you.
Yeah, and
Now,
there will be,
final question there,
sorry, sorry.
where will we be able to get a recording of this session? That will be uploaded probably in the next couple of days, and we will put a link to that in our education LinkedIn page, and also when Rebecca sends out the next newsletter, you'll put a link to it in there, and it will be on our web page as well. So if you visit the carbon literacy website at the moment now, there is a schools page web page as well, so you'll be able to find all the links to all the things we've talked about today as well. So yeah, thank you everybody for coming. I'll hand back to Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to meet everybody and to answer your questions. And again, thank you to those of you on the call who helped out over the development of this toolkit. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you and working with you. It's been brilliant. Thank you.